Hey, welcome to the Bean Scene, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soybean Checkoff. I'm Maxwell Schaefer, your host, and I'm really glad you're here. You know, there's something I've learned spending time with farmers and agricultural leaders over the years. The best stories aren't about yields or markets or policy. They're about people. The people who get up every day and do the work. The people who take risks. The people who speak up, even when speaking up is hard. That's what today's podcast is about. In this episode, we're going to hear from three people who are shaping agriculture and the soybean industry right now, in different ways, from different perspectives, but all of them deeply connected to what it means to farm, to lead, and to care about where we're headed. We'll start with Tom Halverson, CEO of CoBank. Tom's got roots in Iowa farm country, but he also sees the big picture, the macro shifts happening in agriculture right now. Then we'll hear from April Hemis, who's been farming for 41 years on a Century farm in north central Iowa and represents Iowa farmers around the world. And yeah, there's combine karaoke involved. You won't want to miss it. And then we'll meet Chloe Zittergruen, a 19-year-old student at Iowa State and the Iowa FFA state president. But more than that, she's someone who's bridging the gap between agriculture and the rest of the world. Three voices, three perspectives, one story about the future of agriculture and who's building it. Let's dig into the bean scene, where Iowa soy meets life. Aaron Putsey, Chief Officer of Brand Management and Engagement for the Iowa Soybean Association, spoke with Tom Halverson while on site at an event. And here's what he had to say.
Tom Halverson, it's really great to visit with you. Let's start first with, you've got some connections to Iowa and the Eagle Grove area, is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. My parents were both born and raised on farms just on the north and south side of Eagle Grove, and it was the epicenter of my very large family. And I lived there myself when I was young.
Well, it's great to connect. I know you just finished speaking to about 80 farmers, soybean farmers from around the country who are gathered for a United Soybean Board meeting here in Biloxi, Mississippi. And you came to them with a macro view of four critical issues that are affecting farmers today. Let's start with just the macroeconomics of the U.S. Where do we stand?
We stand in a place that's probably better than most people would have expected where we having this conversation a year ago. The economy is growing more robustly than we might have expected. The labor market is, while it's softening to be sure, is still really robust on a long-term historical perspective. And inflation, while stubborn to get back down to 2%, has risen a little bit this year and is kind of hanging in the just below 3% zip code. I'm reasonably confident that it will continue its slow trajectory back down towards the 2% long-term target. So in the big scheme of things, that macroeconomic picture is actually pretty good.
You brought up a very interesting topic that I know you spend a lot of time thinking about, farm leaders do as well. Is this downturn cyclical or is it structural? So start first with maybe just a little bit about the current agricultural economic landscape, and then that big question, cyclical versus structural.
So let me start by defining the nature of things such that, agriculture is a big basket, includes lots of stuff. But back at CoBank, our colleagues and I, we sometimes say, right now, everything with feet is doing fine, right? So everything in the protein complex, great. The dairy people, they're doing really well. So what I'm talking about when I'm thinking about where am I concerned, I'm thinking about row crop agriculture. So think corn, beans, wheat, and the like. Not specialty products in California, not the protein complex and so forth. And in that regard, for many, many months now, I've been asking customers, I'm asking colleagues, and asking myself the question, hey, is the thing we're in Is it a cyclical adjustment, which means that that the normal market forces of price adjustments and supply and demand and so forth will sort of clear the market and return to normal, like in a growing season's worth of time? Or is it structural, meaning it's not going to be market clearing in a season? It's going to be a multi-year thing, and it's going to have consequences that are structural in terms of the way the market works, in the way that businesses and producers respond to it, probably in the way of driving further consolidation and other things that I would describe as structural outcomes. And my conclusion has been for some time now that this is structural, not cyclical. And a year ago, when I started saying that to people, I was a relatively lonely voice. Now I can't find anyone who has a different opinion.
Right. And to that point, Tom, there's just fewer levers that maybe even agriculture can pull, and certainly fewer levels that Congress can pull because of our debt to GDP and perhaps just not the stomach for that kind of economic assistance that we've seen in the past.
I think those are true points. I run a business that's part of the Farm Credit System, which is a government-sponsored enterprise. We have to work very closely with the leadership in the House and the Senate and the White House and the Department of Agriculture, regardless of who's in command and control at any given time. Right. We have to be very bipartisan and even-handed. So I won't make any political comments other than to say, you don't need to be Albert Einstein to be able to see that our politics are pretty dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. There's a very low level of collaboration and cooperation, even on very fundamental things. And therefore, the ability and willingness of national policymakers across the political continuum to address long-term structural challenges for agriculture, or frankly for other industries, is very, very low right now. Mm-hmm. About the only thing that they can do is put money in a bag for this or that industry mm-hmm. as part of a reconciliation bill every once in a while. But that's about all we can expect, and that becomes harder and harder and harder to do over time because of the public finance challenges that we have that are tough and getting tougher at an accelerating rate.
One more question with regards to the agricultural economy. You spoke, and it was during the Q&A here, to a question about if there are 2 billion more people in this world, they may have a need, but will they have the means? And that led to some comments that you shared, Tom, about the importance of trade, of reciprocal trade that elevates humankind. Could you just share a little bit? Because I just thought that the point that you raised is critical at a time where we seem to be kind of veering more into a protectionist mindset as opposed to one that is all about trading with partners who need what we produce.
Well, I'm an unabashed market-oriented capitalist, and I believe that market forces work. They have intended and unintended consequences, but our market forces generate the most efficient outcomes, which generates the highest level of growth in earnings power, and that's what creates the conditions in which the quality of life for people can be improved, both in the United States and elsewhere. It is not a coincidence that in the period of my life, which is now 62 years, the prosperity of this country and of the prosperity of many other countries in the world, particularly countries that when I was a child were at starvation levels of poverty. Think Korea after the Korean War, for example, right, have reached levels of prosperity that they had never known before. How did that happen? It happened by the fact that trade grew 3 times faster than GDP for decades, right? And the classical economists theorizing 200 years ago about the benefits of trade and comparative advantage were correct, right? And the things we're really good at, we should produce and sell, and the things that other people are better at, they should produce and sell, and then we should trade with each other. The more of that we do, the more efficient the economy is, the more rapidly we become prosperous. We just have to recognize that that is a mutually beneficial outcome. I am not picking your pocket when I trade with you, and you are not picking my pocket. We are making mutually beneficial transactions together. And the more of that we do, the better off we are.
Tom, to wrap here, last thought, speaking to the Iowa soybean farmer, so there they are, they're putting a new crop into the field, they're listening to the bean scene. What's a parting message that you would like them to know as they go about seeding a new crop and preparing for another growing season?
Well, some of those people are my relatives. What I'd say is, you're doing very, very important work, right? We are feeding not just ourselves, but we're feeding the world. I always believe that when you're doing something that's, not just, for your own pecuniary interests, but has other virtuous attributes, you can feel good about the work that you're doing. And I applaud our farmers in that regard. I would also just encourage them to remain calm, be thoughtful, and consider what kinds of things they need to do to generate more productivity, more innovation, and to evolve their own businesses, right? Because market forces are profound and they're dynamic and they're moving all the time. And if you're going to be able to remain competitive and economically successful, you're going to have to continue to evolve with those market forces in everything that you do. And I'm very confident about that because it's not an accident that agricultural productivity has doubled in my lifetime, and I have every reason to believe, and I'm confident that that trend can continue because of the quality and skills and capabilities of our agricultural producers and the people that supply the inputs and infrastructure to support them.
Tom, thank you for your time. You've been very gracious with your time here this morning. Thank you so much. Wish you safe travels and do make a trip to Iowa soon.
I will do that. It's an honor and privilege to be with you all.
So we've got the economic reality from Tom, but how do farmers actually respond to that? How do they stay relevant, stay viable, stay ahead of the curve? That's April Hemis. She's been farming for 41 years on a Century farm in north central Iowa. And her story? Well, it's a perfect example of what happens when someone decides to turn economic reality into opportunity. When she saw agriculture needed a voice on the world stage, she built one. Let's hear from April. So, April, I am curious about your farm. You have a Century farm, but it's been around more than a century. How long have you had it? Yeah. Tell us about it.
Well, so the farm, 1901 was when my great-grandfather actually bought it, but they farmed it long before that. So, that's why I say it's a little bit over a quarter century. But I'm very proud to still have it in the family, and this is my 41st year farming at home.
41 years. So yeah. When did you take over the farm?
Oh,
what year was that?
You remember the 80s? And farming?
Oh, boy, that was a great time to take over.
Well, actually,
wait a minute.
It didn't suck as bad as you would think. But,
okay. All right.
No, because I came home in 85, so things were cheaper then. So I bought a bunch of bread gilts from an Amish guy. I cannot make this stuff up.
Really?
Yes, because we went to the sale barn.
Did he have a for sale sign?
No,
How did you learn about this?
We went to the sale barn to buy some bread gilts, and he didn't have the right paperwork or something, but they were the cleanest, healthiest pigs I'd ever seen. So I took his word for it and bought them outside, and those were my first gilts I bought, and away I went.
Wow.
Farrow to finish. And then I worked for the farm. I always tell kids that, I want to go home and farm, but there's no room. And I say, get good at something that farm needs to buy. Just remember, you work for the farm. The farm doesn't work for you. So I worked for the feed to feed my hogs. We kind of worked things out with Dad and Grandpa there. So, so it's, I've improved, or I've added acres to the farm. So it's a little bit under 1,000 acres, tillable.
Okay.
And I have pasture ground and stuff too.
So raising
and it's
livestock?
Just me. I used to have a cow-calf herd and farrow to finish and farm and that all, When Dad and Grandpa, Grandpa lived to be 101. I have stories about him. But when Dad retired and Grandpa retired, I couldn't do everything myself when they really couldn't help anymore. So
how did you know you wanted to take over the farm?
I just always knew it. And I was very comfortable out there. I mean, from day one, I was pulling pigs or lambs or things like that because I had a small hand. And it never bothered me, and I love the animals. And so I was always out helping Dad. There's 4 in my family. I have an older sister. She was always in the house helping Mom. I was always out with Dad. I have a brother who's not even a year younger than me. So he and I were outside, and then a sister 4 years younger. So they always stayed in the house, and I was always outside and expected to do exactly what everybody else did. So,
right. Well, what are some of your memories as a kid, little kid on the farm?
Oh my gosh, stepping on nails always. I spent more time at the doctor.
How many tetanus shots have you had in your life?
A lot. I keep them up. Trust me. Just being outside and playing. I was the queen of mud pies. Let me tell you, I can make a mud pie like no other.
Okay.
Yeah, and in my little red wagon. But climbing trees, just helping Dad with the livestock. Like this time of the year, being inside and waiting for them to cancel school. You know how we had the big console stereo and waiting on the radio for KLMJ or whatever it was to say, no school in Hampton today. You're like, yeah. So, those are the fun days.
Yeah, and then especially if it had snowed and on the farm and there's just so much you could do.
Yep.
41 years ago, taking over a farm as a woman. Mm-hmm. I understand you've run into some, let's just say, times when you weren't taken seriously.
Oh, yeah. I was always home. Oh, it's so nice you came home to help your dad, was the first part of it. And then the people who were around me who I bought things from and, worked with, knew right away I was the one they were going to deal with. That was okay. But to this day, if I go to a farm show or anything, if I go with any other guys, and I always go with a bunch of guys, they always say, oh, you need to buy your husband this. And they'll always back up and go, she is not my wife. That's for sure. So we have to pick out who's going to be April's husband and play the game. So, yeah. But we have fun doing that. I know many other women farmers who I served on the Iowa Soybean Board with, and we would walk around and we loved it because we were invisible to them. We didn't get bothered. We didn't get pressured. And then when we really wanted to know something, we'd look at each other. Well, should we play the woman farmer card? Could you tell us about this? So, we have lots of fun stories and you just deal with it,
What would
had many people you don't farm. And it's usually younger guys, which really surprises me. And I go, and even if I can't convince them, I always walk away going, well, I'm going home to the farm, whether you like it or not. It's my gig.
I got to go back because you piqued my interest early on about your 101-year-old grandfather.
Yes.
And you said you have some stories.
I have so many stories about him. But
what's your favorite?
Well, when people get down about agriculture and think there's no future, it's bleak, I go, listen. My grandpa lived to be 101 years old. He started farming with 3 horses. They were blind horses because he was cheap, No, I'm serious. I usually don't add that in there, but that is the honest to God truth. He goes, well, they didn't spook that way,
Wow.
So 3 horses, and he lived long enough to see auto steer come in to agriculture. And I remember he was living with us, and I remember handing him the magazine, when it talked about it, and he said, I always knew they'd do it. I didn't think I'd live long enough to see it.
Wow.
And can you imagine? So he planted soybeans at 100 and combine corn at 100. So, think of what he saw in his lifetime. He kept the farm through the Depression. He said there was the banker came to him and said, Bert, you just need a couple more good years and you're going to be fine. But there's a guy coming through, going to all the farms, seeing which ones they want to buy, a Des Moines guy. And he said, here's the deal. And this is about working with people like we talked about. Let the doors fall off the hinges, let the weeds grow, just let this place look like crap. He won't want to buy it. So Grandpa did it, about killed him. But he did, and he said, They came through in their big black car, and the guy was smoking his big cigar, and I looked in the window, and I had the worst pair of coveralls on you could think of. He goes, they drove in, and they drove right out. He said, the banker said, I don't want this place. And so that's how he kept the farm through the Depression.
Wow.
Yeah. See, so stories like that.
He didn't
you
have to
kids
do
out
that.
there, listen to your grandparents. They have great stories.
You didn't have to do that during the farm crisis,
no,
though,
I
did you?
did
Okay.
not. Yeah, thankfully. Because my grandma, his wife, was very good with her money. Let's put it that way.
I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this because I was watching Market to Market back during COVID, and I caught the Combine Karaoke segment. Yes. And so that's why when I learned that we were going to have this conversation, I thought, oh, this is so cool. You know, you got your Combine girls, and you turned that into
We're actually having girls' night out tonight with them. So,
oh, really?
Yes.
That's like a social media juggernaut in the
we didn't
ag
mean
social
to be,
media.
Yeah. No, okay, and we don't even know how Paul Yeager takes full credit for starting that. And I'm like, whatever, Paul. So it was Julianne Johnston who said, you said it, we're going to do it. And I go, okay, you know. And it's one of those where it's anyone who's been in a combine all fall, it's a grind and you just, okay.
Of course.
And then it's like, oh, we haven't done Combine Karaoke. And then I realized I only have a field left or something, you know. So I call the girls and let's do this. It's just, it sounds so corny, but it fills my soul. Because you're just wiped out by the end of harvest, and then you get a bunch of us together, and then, you know, it's like 1 year it was, you guys have been here for an hour and a half, and I haven't even turned the camera on. We have to sing songs, you know? So who wouldn't want to get in the cab with 4 hot babes like us?
Right.
I mean, we'll find room.
Right.
Yeah.
There's that little tiny seat that in some of those
Yes,
cabs.
and girls can drive cotton. Somebody's like, actually, somebody goes, it's a good thing you don't have to drive, April, because you're using your hands. I go, I know. You just push the button. That's why we do it in corn.
Well, you spent a lot of time talking to women in agriculture and, you know, all over the country, but also internationally. And I know you're involved with the Uganda women farmers. Tell us about that.
So it was a USAID and Iowa State University project for 2 years. So that's why my heart broke when they disbanded USAID, because it did such good work, you know, with people. So that was women from Iowa women farmers going to Uganda, and we worked with 10 groups with 10 women in each one, so over 100 women, and then the guys would start to show up. But the women do the farming there, and it was 2 different projects, but bookkeeping, it was amazing. You know, bookkeeping, how can we help you be more productive? Soybeans, we gave them improved soybean varieties. You know, and they said, well, we were always told soybeans harm our soils and take nitrogen from the soil. And then we're like, no, it couldn't be further from the truth. It adds nitrogen to your soil. And, you know, so just dispelling those myths. They learned how to do book work. We got them better quality corn. They went there and they said, these people, so I had people come around to their farms and buy the corn and soybeans from them. They said the moisture was this, and we don't think it was that. So I took my handheld moisture tester with me. And I hated to tell them, but you know what? This guy's right. Your corn is this moisture, you know, because I showed them on the moisture tester. So, but then they grouped together. So they formed groups, you know, marketing groups. And then that way their corn was more valuable. And then by improving the quality, they could store it longer. So not selling it right during the market like I do. I'll store it and sell it in April or May, you know. And so it really helped them out there. And it was just an amazing time. And then when I went back, they remembered me, and they just absolutely loved hearing my story of what I did and how I was the farmer. And, you know, it was amazing to them. And the biggest difference, I was just asked, what was the biggest difference? I said, we have choices. They really didn't have choices. You know, many of them had, you know, 10, 12 children. You know, we don't know what their husbands did, but they were the ones, it was, you know, they were farming to feed their families. So. Wow.
Well, and of course the ISA enables this, right?
100%. Yeah.
How does the ISA, in your experience, enable this worldwide, not just
my God.
Uganda?
Yeah, we do so much. So, you know, we'll go and market around the world, but even more importantly, I love this story, and I tell it all the time because it's how our checkoff dollars are meant to work with blacktop additive, so the soy blacktop. And ISA started it. We had hyoleic oil. What can we do with it? So Iowa Soybean went to Iowa State. They developed this product to drop in to the oil. Rather than using a chemical, they'll use the hyoleic soybean oil. And then the pavers of Iowa got in, the Iowa DOT, the Iowa State, all got into this together. So all these monies are working together to help develop this product and test it. And now it's being used worldwide. We just found out it's going to be used in a country. I can't remember the country now, sorry, but it's going to be worldwide, used across the seas. But and they tested Iowa State. It's been tested, and it works better than the chemical replacement. So that's a great story, how everybody comes together to use something I can raise on my farm, to make the roads better.
Well, I equate the soybeans to duct tape. It's another use for duct tape. It's another use for soybeans. And people have no idea.
Right. Well, and the other, so with fuels, the biofuels coming on, and what people don't understand is a bean, and it's not exact, but about 20% is oil and 80% is meal. So we have to get rid of the meal. Well, what do we do in Iowa the best? We feed hogs and we feed laying hens. You feed and we have all that corn to use too. So, we feed that kind of meal, but finding different uses for meal has been great too. So they developed it into a glue. So it's called Synlon. So the AstroTurf, and they use it as a glue for the backing. And
I read about that.
Yeah. It's amazing once you step back and see these new uses, not only, but feeding the livestock is where it's at. That's where more inclusion rates are very important.
So what advice would you give a young person that's growing up on a farm right now, give them incentive to stay on that farm and stay in agriculture?
We as farmers really do talk about that, and I said, we can't dissuade them. It's been a great life for us. It's been a great life for them. Thank God I married somebody who didn't want to do anything with the farm. So he had a very good job in town and paid my health insurance. And that's what's needed, these days,
sure,
to be totally honest. But if they want to come home to the farm, sky's the limit, honestly. And anymore, here's what I say. That corn doesn't care if a man or a woman planted it. The soybeans don't care. The livestock doesn't care who feeds it. People are the only ones that put, think caps on people. And, you can do whatever you want to do. Do I need help on the farm sometimes? Yes. I'm not strong enough to do some of it, but I find ways to cheat, or I call somebody, So, it's... my John Deere guys love me. Thank God. So,
did you get that little excavator? Did you?
I did.
Oh,
and
nice.
I love it. I'm not going to lie.
What April just talked about, speaking up when it's uncomfortable, building platforms, taking on leadership, that's the challenge every young person in agriculture faces right now. And Chloe Zittergruen? She's doing exactly that. She's 19, she's the Iowa FFA state president, and her approach is, well, let's just say it reflects on how the next generation is showing up. You were a shy freshman. This is a great story. You were so shy, Chloe, that you couldn't recite the FFA creed. Is that right? Tell me about that.
That is correct. So my freshman year of high school, my ag teacher approached me and said, hey, you're going to do the FFA creed. You're going to be our creed speaker for the chapter, like most ag teachers do, throw a kid into a competition, whether they're fully ready for it or not. And I was like, no, there's no way I'm not doing this. I'm not talking in front of people. This is not happening. And I refused and refused.
And you're just reading it. You're not really, you're not speaking extemporaneously.
Mm-mm.
Are you? Wow.
I was like, nope, this is not happening. But for some reason that year, I could do individual speech and drama, but I was too scared to do the creed. Not really sure how those two things work out, but I was too scared and ultimately was like, nope, not doing it. Never ended up doing the FFA creed.
You've reached out to kids in urban areas and you bring them to the farm. I love this. Tell us about it.
So last year, through a program with National FFA, I went out to Indianapolis for a couple days, and at their state fairgrounds, they have a program called Farm to Pizza. And they bring inner city school children to the state fairgrounds, and they get to see livestock and different plants. Usually they show tomatoes and different herbs, and then they can see some wheat plants. And then they come back after they go and see all of these things, and they get to make a pizza. And they got to learn about all the ingredients that go into their pizza while they were there. And so it's a little farm to table activity that these inner city school children get to do.
I love that. If you could give any advice to a shy, super shy kid, who grew up on a farm and is part of FFA and maybe gets challenged to read the creed, kind of advice would you give them?
Do it scared and get uncomfortable, because that is when we grow the most as people and as humans. When we are scared, when we are uncomfortable, we always think, oh, I have to feel ready to do something, or I have to be comfortable, or there's going to be a perfect time in my life to do something. And truthfully, there never will be. You will never fully be ready to do something. And I fully believe our ag educators can see our potential every single day that we don't see. And that's why they push us and they tell us, hey, you're doing this contest, whether you feel prepared or not, because it is going to make you a better person. So do it scared, do it uncomfortable, because that's when we grow the most.
Well, this is fantastic. And I guess I would wrap it up with what excites you the most about agriculture right now, moving forward?
Oh, I know we kind of talked before we were officially on air, like the younger generation, and seeing what the younger generation is going to bring to the table for agriculture, because right now in the classroom, we are preparing students for careers that aren't even existing yet. So those career readiness skills, but also just seeing what that younger generation is going to bring to the table and what innovations and different ideas they have when it comes to sustainability and yields, and how can we feed a growing population on less ground? What does that look like? So seeing what the younger generation is going to bring to the table.
And wouldn't you say there's so many variables with agriculture as far as equipment and technology that you don't just have to be a farmer to get into the field, so to speak?
I would completely agree with that. At chapter visits, there are students who we do different activities. One of my favorites involves spaghetti and marshmallows, and I tell them to just build a tower. And so it's interesting seeing the different engineer brains that these students have. And I ask them, I was like, do you enjoy building things? Yeah, but I could never be in agriculture, as they like to say. And I'm like, what about programming? There's students who love video games. I'm like, what about programming tractors that drive themselves? And they're like, wait, that would be so cool. And so just showing students that you can be an engineer in agriculture, you can develop software in agriculture, you can do all of these things that you already have an interest in right now.
State convention coming up. What do you want members to know about getting involved?
Go to all the sessions, go to all the workshops, go watch different kids compete, watch them give their speeches and give their marketing plans and how they're going to sell this different ag product. Fully immerse themselves. Go meet new people. Don't just sit with your chapter, only talk to people you know, because you never know those connections that you're going to make with Joe Schmo sitting 3 rows down from you in Hilton Coliseum, because those people may and probably will come up in your life further down the road. Maybe an Iowa State roommate, maybe it's someone that you will work with in a future career. Like, you really don't know how much good could come out of it.
All about networking.
Oh, it always is.
Well, there you have it. 3 conversations that span decades in agriculture. From April's years of building relationships and breaking through resistance, to Tom's clear-eyed look at what's really happening in the farm economy, to Chloe's determination to make sure agriculture has a voice in rooms where it's not always heard. What struck me listening to all of this is a reminder that agriculture's future doesn't belong to any one person or any one generation. It belongs to the people who are willing to stay curious, stay connected, and stay focused on something bigger than themselves. Tom's doing it by helping farmers navigate real economic shifts. April's doing it on the global stage. Chloe's doing it by showing her peers why agriculture matters. And that's the thing, right? Agriculture matters. not just to Iowa, not just to America, but to the world. And that's going to keep being true. The question is, who's going to be in the room when decisions are made? Whose voices are going to be heard? If you get nothing else from our first episode of The Bean Scene, let it be this. The future of farming belongs to the people brave enough to speak up about it. The people who understand the past but aren't afraid to imagine something different. The people who know that leadership isn't always comfortable, but it is necessary. Now for our fun soy fact. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, farmers across the country are expected to plant 84.7 million acres of soybeans this spring. That's a 4% increase from 2025. As planting gets underway this month, we wish soybean farmers everywhere a safe and productive season. Thanks for listening to the very first episode of The Bean Scene, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soybean Checkoff. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever works best for you. And don't forget to follow the Iowa Soybean Association on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube to stay connected. We'll be back soon with more stories about where Iowa soy meets life. Until then, keep growing.